Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Westfield Historical Society's June 21st, 2025 presentation about the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail. You're going to discover part 2 of the extraordinary and inclusive Westfield history related to the trail. So thank you all for being here. I'll just say that this project is funded by a 2025 project grant from the New Jersey Historical Commission, which is a division of the Department of State. I'd like to introduce to you first Mr. Brian Remite, who is the president of the Westfield Historical Society. Brian?
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to hear what our researchers have found about the inclusive history of Westfield. The Westfield Historical Society is a 501c3 that was founded in 1969, and our mission is to document and share and educate on the history of Westfield, New Jersey, and its vast connection to our entire country. We try to create a welcoming environment for anyone that's interested in Westfield and its history, and we have one of the largest archives in the entire state. So thank you all so much for being here, and I'll throw it back to Julie, who will start our presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. So I'm the project manager for this research project. We started this project in the fall of 2024, and we are now just wrapping it up with our presentation to the public. Our goals for this research project were to research and document the records of the Westfield Presbyterian Church, the New Jersey State Archives, the Westfield Historical Society Archives, and other repositories of Revolutionary War era information to discover the names of free and enslaved inhabitants of the greater Westfields of Elizabethtown, to tell their stories of service in the war for independence, along with their stories of domestic servitude and bondage during the time of the Yorktown Campaign and the Revolutionary War. Second, to research and document the mood of the inhabitants of Westfield leading up to the Revolutionary War, and document the activities of the committees of correspondence as an example, because these are important stories for the community to uncover, to learn, remember, and commemorate. Number 3, to publish blog articles in Benevento's history blog about the research project process, and to more widely share the project's information and inspire others in pursuit of doing their own research projects. And number 4, to present the research findings to the public and members of the Westfield Historical Society. Number 5, to preserve the research findings at the Westfield Historical Society's archives. And finally, number 6, to use this research findings as a foundation to create an enduring, outdoor, accessible, educational exhibit in Westfield. Just a little background on the timeline of the Revolutionary War. You know, we are in the beginnings, the 250th anniversary of the beginnings of the war. And as you make your way through 76, 77, the 10 crucial days in Trenton and Princeton, 77 in Morristown, and Washington's army in Valley Forge. And in 1778, the United States and France officially became allies. In 79, Washington's army was in Morristown, and in 1780, General Rochambeau and his French troops arrive in Newport, Rhode Island. This starts the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail timeline. In 1781, in July, the Rochambeau and his French troops encamp in Westchester County for 6 weeks. And then in late August, the Continental Army and the French troops marched through New Jersey. And on August 29, 1781, they marched through Westfield, New Jersey. And then, of course, leading and where they were marching to is Yorktown, Virginia. So in September through October 19th, they conducted the siege of Yorktown and forced the British surrender. That was really the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. So what is the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail? Well, it's a 680-mile-long water and land corridor from Newport, Rhode Island to Yorktown, Virginia. And it follows the march of the French and Continental armies as they marched to victory in Yorktown, Virginia. In 1780 through 1783, they moved through Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And as I said, it was the final major battle of the Revolutionary War, and it then led to the independence for the United States. The Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail is a mouthful. We call it lovingly WARO as its acronym. The trail was authorized by Congress in 2009, making it the youngest of the national historic trails in the country. And it was designated such because of its national significance of the joint action taken by Washington and Rochambeau's allied armies in the longest march and most complex military maneuver of the Revolutionary War. The trail provides visitors with recreational and educational opportunities and connects communities through a network of organizations, public agencies, sites, and trails related to the American Revolution. There are dozens of historic sites along the trail, which are on the National Register of Historic Places, or have been recognized and preserved by local or regional historic commissions and governments. This on the right is a map of the entire trail. As you can see, starting in Newport, Rhode Island, making its way through Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, all the way on down to Newport, to Yorktown, Virginia. And the trail actually tracks the return march of the troops also. This shield sign that you see is the logo of the Washington-Rochambeau National Historic Trail, and it is a unit of the National Trail System administered by the National Park Service. So this is the Washington-Rochambeau route through New Jersey. They entered New Jersey in late August of 1781, and they departed through Trenton on September 1st of 1781. And you can see in the map the star where Westfield is and the date of August 29th. The legend in this map shows the different troops. There were actually 3 major routes. The French were on the yellow route, and here in Westfield was a Continental Army line that went through Westfield. How do we know it went through Westfield? Well, we know because we have primary source evidence through the journals and writings of soldiers and officers. We know that it is documented that the troops did pass through Westfield. This is one of the primary source documents. It's called Thomas Groton, his book. Thomas Groton was a private, and he kept a journal while he was serving in the Continental Army. He used his journal to apply for his pension, and this is the page where you see, he says, Yea, 29th, marched to Westfield, Spanktown, Brunswick, and encamped. And he was referring to August 29th. There's a little typo on my chart there. August 29th of 1781. So now I want to talk to you about the members of the research team. We are very fortunate, the Westfield Historical Society, to have brought together this research team, starting with Robert Selig, Ph.D. He earned his Ph.D. in history at the University of Würzburg in 1988 and has worked, researched, and published in the field ever since. He's been the consultant and project historian to the National Park Service for the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail Project. Dr. Selig has been widely recognized with honors, awards, and citations, including Chevalier of the French National Order of Merit. This is awarded by the President of the French Republic, independent of the nationality of the recipient, for distinguished military or civil achievements. It is the highest medal awarded to foreigners. The honor recognized Dr. Selig's role as one of the foremost American historians for the contributions of France in the American War of Independence. He presently conducts history research in the U.S., France, and Germany. Our next researcher is Dr. Susannah Mary Chewning. She earned her Ph.D. in English from Drew University in 1996 after earning her MPhil in English literature from Drew University in 1994 and an MA in medieval studies from the University of Bristol, England in 1989 and a BA in literature from Warren College in 1987. She is presently a senior professor of English at Union College of Union County, New Jersey. She has presented at numerous conferences and has edited several books and published many articles. And also we have Nicholas Benevento, who earned his special education endorsement from the Rutgers University's Graduate School of Education in 2014, and an M.Ed in Social Studies Education from Rutgers University in 2009, and a BA in History from Livingston College in 2008. He is a history blogger since 2023. He's presently a social studies and special education teacher at Glen Ridge High School in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. He writes about his experiences at historic sites in New Jersey and beyond, and you can find his writings at beneventoshistoryblog.com. Before you hear from our researchers, I just want to thank the following people: the New Jersey Historical Commission, the Westfield Historical Society Trustees, and President Remite, the Westfield Historical Society Archives, Rutgers University Library System, Princeton University Library System, the New Jersey State Archives, Morristown National Historic Park, Fairview Cemetery, the Presbyterian Church of Westfield, and Ms. Nancy Pinoir of the Plainfield Historical Society. So with that now, and we are fortunate that Dr. Selig was able to record his presentation, even though he couldn't be with us in person today. So next you're going to hear from Dr. Robert Selig.
Hello, everyone. Julie Diddell, member of the Westfield Historical Society, and I present to you Dr. Robert Selig, who is going to give us a presentation on the research he performed. Dr. Selig, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. It's wonderful to be here and to talk to you, even if it's from somewhat of a distance, about the contributions that I made or trying to make to the current project. My contribution is, as you can see on the screen here, about the citizens of Westfield and the coming of the American Revolution. Now, the goals and purposes of my project here is basically local. We wanted to identify the citizens of Westfield who are members of the Essex County Committee of Correspondence, a committee that existed parallel to and in opposition to the royal government, and to document the activities of that Committee of Correspondence. Now, we want to document the mood and the responses of the citizens from Westfield in the coming up, in the run-up to the Revolutionary War, and how they enforce the tasks that they are supposed to, the tasks that they are getting from the statewide, if not the National Committee of Correspondence. And lastly, since the American Revolution, of course, has a military component, the War of Independence, I want to look at the pension applications and documents that show us how they militarily tried to support and defend the ideals of the American Revolution. But in all of this, the study is local. We're focusing on Westfield, not a history of New Jersey, not a history of Essex County, because that is something that is not always addressed as the fact that is the role that is played by villages such as Westfield and the inhabitants is crucial for understanding the roots of the resistance to British policies and how independence was won, because the implementation of whatever Congress or the state wanted, the implementation rests with the local supporters of revolutionary ideals. And that's what I want to talk about today. Before I can do that, however, I think we need to set the historical context within which the First Continental Congress, the Committees of Correspondence on all levels act. And to set this historical context, we have to start with the Boston Tea Party. You know, in May 1773, the British House of Commons passed the Tea Act. This Tea Act did not levy new taxes, but rather granted marketing privileges to the financially troubled British East India Company by reducing the tax on tea imported into the colonies. And we all know that during the night of December 1773, Massachusetts radicals boarded 3 East India Company ships moored in Boston Harbor and dumped tea into the water. And then in response to this, the House of Commons passed the Boston Port Act in March 1774, which became law on the 31st of March. Pending restitution, the act closed the port of Boston and ordered the inhabitants to pay a fine for the lost tea. In Massachusetts, resistance to these laws organized itself in an ad hoc committee of correspondence and tasked with establishing and maintaining contact with the other British colonies. The Boston Committee of Correspondence on the 13th of May 1774 sent a circular letter to the other 12 colonies asking them to join in the suspension of trade and commerce with the mother country. And in May 1774, the 31st of May 1774, the Committee of Correspondence of the New Jersey Legislature, in other words, on a colony-wide level, pledged support for the Bostonians, but declined to take any action prior to the meeting of a statewide General Congress. Not even 3 weeks later, in June 1774, the Massachusetts House of Representatives called for a meeting of representatives from all colonies in a Continental Congress in Philadelphia to discuss relations with the mother country. That is the larger historical context within which the Committee of Correspondence in Elizabeth and in New Jersey will act. Because more important for our projects than what's happening in Boston or in Philadelphia are developments on the local level. Because as news of this Boston Port Act spread along the eastern seashore, following the Boston example, grassroots resistance organized itself in extra legal organizations called committees of observation, committees of safety, or committees of correspondence. These committees stand outside the established colonial governmental apparatus. They initially established themselves in support of the inhabitants of the city of Boston, something that the official colonial authorities did not or could not do. It is important to note that from its very beginning, the opposition to British policies grew from roots at this local level, concurrently in communities and counties, And from these local roots, opposition radiated upwards and created statewide or colony-wide organizations and united in inter-colony opposition that then culminated in the First and then the Second Continental Congress. However, we need to keep in mind that for this resistance to grow, the ground has to be prepared on the local level. And it was only because of these deep local roots of opposition to what the colonials called taxation without representation, that they interpreted activities by the House of Commons, that they interpreted as a tax on their English liberties. It's only because of that that the revolutionary movement could grow, survive, and develop into a coherent, unifying ideology that radicalized and ultimately culminated in a demand for separation from the crown of King George III and American independence. In that grassroots developments, in that grassroots opposition, Essex County and the citizens from the town of Westfield are on the forefront of this grassroots resistance to British policy in New Jersey. Because on the 7th of June, 1774, John DeHart and Isaac Ogden invited all the inhabitants of the county of Essex to a meeting in Newark on the 11th of June, 1774. Remember, this is 1 week before Boston called for a national convention. There are activities on the county and local level. And participation in this meeting that's supposed to happen in Newark is, and I quote, open to freeholders and inhabitants of the county of Essex. And in a remarkable display of what we would call participatory democracy, the call says that every gentleman present is desired freely to express his sentiments on the present occasion, end of quote. This general meeting of the committees of the several counties in New Jersey is a meeting of extra legal entities in opposition to royal authorities. When this meeting finally occurs in New Brunswick on 21st of July, the representatives from Essex County and Westfield are there. All of this, remember, is before the First Continental Congress even meets on the 5th of September. And these local activities, including Essex County and Westfield, are so important because they give instructions to the people they sent to Philadelphia of what to do. On a local level, then, on the 28th of November, a call went out to the freeholders of the Free Borough of Elizabeth to meet on the 6th of December at Samuel Smith Red Lion Inn. And there is the call to this meeting published in the New York Gazette, which is actually a loyalist newspaper, but there you have it. And at that meeting, the folks that showed up chose the following gentlemen to serve on their committee of observation. And the minutes of this first meeting still exist in this typed copy, December 6th. And here's the list of these 31 members from Essex County and Westfield who are on this local committee of correspondence. They are the face of the opposition to the British government, and they will be the enforcers of demands made both in Philadelphia as well as in Trenton from the statewide committee of correspondence. Among these 31 names are many people, many men who left their mark in New Jersey, Essex County, and Westfield history. Now, with the notable exception of a man named Jedediah Swan, about whom I'll talk in a couple of minutes, there's no sizable collection of letters, journals, or business records that survive. but we can discern through the activities before and during the War of Independence where they stand. It is through their actions and activities, such as enlistment and service in the Continental Army or New Jersey militia, we can discern their positions in the struggle with the mother country. And 10 of these 31 committee members are resident of Westfield. Who are these men? In broad terms, we can say they were the local elites, even though some of them later gained statewide, if not national, prominence. Local elites means what? William Barnett and Jonathan Dayton are MDs. William Bott from Springfield becomes New Jersey's first adjutant general. Abraham Clark from Roselle or Westfield is a signer of the Declaration of Independence who serves in the Continental Congress. And here is a portrait of Abraham Clark. Elias Dayton is one of the leading citizens of Elizabeth and becomes a colonel in the Continental Army and serves in every major campaign of the war from German Flats, Bound Brook, Brandywine, Monmouth, Yorktown, and ends the war as a brigadier general. There's Jonathan Hampton, Colonel Jonathan Hampton, who is the chair of the committee, who had been a surveyor and paymaster. He supervised the construction of the military road from Elizabeth through Morristown to the Minisink Valley, which is today basically New Jersey Route 10 and US Route 206. He had an interesting way, the way he died. It was on the 1st of November, 1777, and a contemporary says he died allegedly while celebrating news of the surrender of Burgoyne at Saratoga 2 weeks earlier. Hampton is one of the few slave owners on the committee. He left a Negro wench to his widow. There's Cornelius Hetfield, who is not so well known, but his son Cornelius is very well known, born in 1775, because he is a notorious loyalist who feeds the British on information from Elizabeth, including the meeting of the Committee of Correspondence. He becomes a captain of a loyalist company and dies in London in 1823. There's Ephraim Marsh, who is a captain in the Essex County Militia. He is among the men who helped capture the British supply ship Blue Mountain Valley in January 1776. He too is a slave owner, and he is buried in the cemetery of the Presbyterian Church in Westfield. In other words, the background, socio-economic, cultural background is wide and includes loyalists, includes slave owners, includes MDs. It's, every imaginable component or aspect of the local elites is represented there. The men were, of course, well off, and the damage claims that they filed following the rape of Westfield by British forces on the 26th of June, 1770, prove it. Here's a damage claim by Joseph Stanbury, losses twice in December 76 and June 1777 for 189 pounds 12 shilling. He has horses, saddles, cows, yokes of oxen, riding chairs. This is an agricultural society. There are sheep on there, for example. There is Ephraim Marsh, who suffers losses to the amount of 106 pounds. He has calves are listed in there. A calf is about one pound. A shoat, a newly weaned piglet, is worth £1. An acre, at the bottom it says 1 acre of flax and oats entirely destroyed, £2. Now let's move on to the one man from whom or about whom we know more than about anyone else, and that is Jedediah Swan. Swan is born on the 5th of August, 1735 in New London, Connecticut. And he holds a whole array of titles. He's an MD, he's a Justice of the Peace, he's a tax collector, he's an overseer of the poor, he owns half a mill, he's very well off. And one example for how well he is off is a receipt for the purchase of a beaver hat that we found at Rutgers University in his papers. That beaver hat is 2 pounds and 15 shillings. Remember, a calf is worth 1 pound. This is like the equivalent of 3 calves that he is able to spend on his beaver hat. That's 2.5 acres of flax and oats that he's able to spend. Most important for us, of course, is the fact that Swan raised a company for service in the New Jersey militia. Here's a detail of an 1832 pension application from David Williams from Rahway. He was 17 years old when he enlisted for 5 months in Captain Jedediah Swan's company in said county of Essex. George Jewell also served in Jedediah Swan's company. He files a pension application that shows that he is both in the Continental Army as well as in the militia. Here is James Freeland, who enlists in Jedediah Swan's company. And this enlistment goes on and continues not just in 1776, but it goes on into 1777. In July of 1776, we see that about a month before the Battle of Long Island, his company is 52 men strong, half of them present for duty. Swan and his company is at the Battle of Rhode Island at the very beginning of the War of Independence, just a couple of weeks after the Declaration of Independence had been signed. We don't know how long Swan served, but he was certainly wearing a uniform in the spring of 1777, because here is a receipt from the spring of 1777. And just as an aside, this colonel, the regiment he was in, is commanded by a Colonel Philip von Cortlandt. There are 2 Colonels Philip von Cortlandt. One is of the wealthy New York family, and here we have this Philip von Cortlandt, Van Cortlandt, who is commands the 2nd Regiment of Essex County Militia, and he's buried in Belleville. Now let's take a look at the second goal of my report, namely the wartime experiences of citizens from Westfield. The prime source of research for these experiences are, of course, the pension applications filed following the Federal Pension Act of 1832. In my report, I partially transcribed or cited about 25 pension applications of veterans from Westfield, but there are at least twice as many still among those approximately 3,000 applications of veterans from New Jersey that could or should maybe transcribed or published and certainly made public. These applications are meant to prove military service, and so the applicants focus on what they had, where they had served, under which officers, and they also provide corroborative evidence, which is almost exclusively provided by men who had served in the same units with them. And these affidavits frequently provide information that interests us most, because they describe incidents during service which every member of the unit would remember. One of those is the capture of Tesserans in late December 1776, as you say at the bottom here. That shows up in many applications, together, of course, with the fact that they fought in the battles of Springfield and Connecticut Farms in 1780. Veterans from Westfield serve in the infantry, they serve as artificers, they serve as musicians. Almost all of them begin in the summer, their service in the summer of 1776, though often drafted for 1 to 3 months service only. Many served 2, 3, years or more by the time the war is over. Sometimes their tours were sequential, sometimes there are 2 or 3 months gaps in between. They are, as one veteran says, raised for the purpose of defending the coast so that the militia might till the lands. As I said, they serve mostly Springfield and Connecticut farms, but people like Dayton or Aaron Ogden, actually who later becomes the governor of New Jersey, fought under Lafayette in Virginia, are fighting before Yorktown. Their pension applications tell us that some of these men fled their homes to escape the dangers of war. Some saw their homes plundered by British troops during the plunder of Westfield in 1777. British soldiers, and I quote, destroyed and took away all their movable property from the house of William Clark's father. Some veterans say they were wounded, had friends and comrades killed. John Dunham, for example, says he was in a skirmish and saw Richard Woodruff killed. I saw him brought out of the woods as a corpse. Others are taken prisoners. William Clark, for example, says he went down the Raritan in a whaleboat and was taken a prisoner near the lighthouse and confined in the sugar house at New York for about 4 months. Many were desperately poor when they applied for pensions, dependent on the charity of friends. As David Whitehead says in his application, he has no hope of support for the remnants of his life and respect for his expect from his country, for whose independence he has done some little service. So Benjamin Mulford says he has no real estate and no personal property except the bed and bedding. And 77-year-old Ezra Ross says he is wrecked by disease and not worth $5 in the world. And so the initial payment of $110, followed by a monthly stipend of $20, must have seemed like a miracle. I'm bringing up Ezra Ross because he claims he was born in Westfield. He has a birthday, says he moved out to Ohio where he filed his application. But all of my research and research by the Westfield Historical Society, like Brian Remite, has not found a single man from Westfield by the name of Ezra Ross. So one wonders whether he made at least some of this up. Some of the veterans did well. Some returned to their hometown, became church deacons, pillars of their communities. Poverty or lack of land forced others to move west or see their children and grandchildren settle as far away as Louisville in Kentucky. Like one of Hannah Sayre's grandchildren took the family Bible along, which she needed to prove her marriage because she had been married by the Reverend Caldwell in Springfield, and her official record was burned when the British torched the church in 1780. And so here you see how 50 years or more later, after the war, the consequences of this war and wartime activities still impact the lives of people. Now, let me conclude my talk by talking about Westfield, returning to Westfield, and the Miller Corey House Museum, which is a site on the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route and a witness to the American Revolution and the War of Independence. Clark Miller was one of the 8 children of Samuel Miller and his wife Sabra Clark, who built this house in 1780 in what was the Westfields of Elizabethtown. Clark was born in July 1757 and died in May 1843. He began the first of his 5 tours of duty again in the spring of 1776 in a company of Captain Scudder. Then he came a couple months of service under Captain John Crane and others. They're all Westfielders, all born in Westfield. By the time the war was over, he had served for 2 years and 6 months and, as he says, lost the hearing of one ear by the discharge of a cannon, a constant reminder of his service in the War of Independence, and he is one of more than 70 veterans who lie buried in the cemetery of the Westfield Presbyterian Church. So let me sum up what I have. In the summer and fall of 1774, many citizens of Westfield joined tens of thousands of fellow colonists clamoring for the protection of their rights as Englishmen. And over the months and years that followed, they organized their opposition politically in extra-legal committees of correspondence and militarily in revolutionary militias. We need to remind ourselves that it was well before the Declaration of Independence that patriots such as Jedediah Swan had both joined the Elizabeth County of Correspondence as well as raised militia companies and marched on New York City. They suffered the depredations of war when Westfield was ransacked in June 1777 and the dangers of warfare either in the Continental Army or the militia until independence was won and peace concluded in 1783. Damage claims and pension applications highlight the hardships of the revolution and the war for them and their families, and their frequent struggle with poverty and old age. As we commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, the New Jersey Historical Commission, the Westfield Historical Society, especially Brian Remite and his volunteers, and of course, Julie Diddell, are to be lauded for their efforts to remind us of the sacrifices of the men and women who gave so much that we can enjoy the benefits of their efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Selig. And we have to commend you for your incredible diligence and perseveration to uncover research and not give up on transcribing those hard to read pension files. You've given us a great window into the life of some of our militia people here in Westfield, and we know there's more out there, and we really look forward to an opportunity to work with you again on more research. So until then, we say thank you, Dr. Selig. You've done a fabulous job, and see you on the road.
Great. That was really terrific. And we're grateful to Dr. Selig. Our next researcher, Dr. Susannah Chewning, has continued her research, and she's going to present to us now. Susannah.
Thank you. Let me make sure I do this correctly. Oops. Okay, I think that's right. Okay. So I am Susannah Chewning, and I teach at Union College of Union County. As
Susannah, you still have the chat window open on the right, or participants.
Sorry. Sorry, it's there. Okay, better? I hope. Okay. So I came to this project 2 or 3 years ago. I was originally working with the Martin Luther King Association of Westfield, and was sort of loaned by them to this project, and have since sort of come into it on my own. As Julia explained, my background in education is as a medieval history and literature scholar, and how I ended up learning about African Americans in Westfield, New Jersey is an interesting story for another time. I'm glad that Dr. Selig mentioned that Union County used to be Essex County, and I found a map right before it became Union County in 1850. This map was created, and it shows what this part of Essex County, which is now Union County, once looked like. And I did this map for my students, but you can see the little rectangles represent, so this is Plainfield, Scotch Plains, Westfield, Garwood, Cranford, and Rahway. And as many of you know, what we call the Westfields for this project is pretty much everything west of Elizabeth to about Plainfield, including Rahway, not going up as far as Springfield and not going down as far as Woodbridge, but it's sort of everything in that corridor from Elizabeth to Plainfield. And so the town of Westfield was founded after the war, but this area is, all of it is called the Westfields. And this is just, I blew this up so you could see a little bit better. It took me a while to orient myself, but this section right here is where the church is. This is the train line as of 1850. So you can get a sort of sense of downtown Westfield. This is where Union County College is. So this is what I think became Broad Street, ultimately, just to get a sense of location. So one of the things that I first started to discover as I started to learn about the African Americans who were enslaved in Westfield during this time is that there are a number of streets named for the founders of Westfield, Cranford, and Scotch Plains, as well there should be. I'm not complaining about that. But I have discovered that a lot of the names of those streets are associated with families who enslaved people. And so I have several pictures of some of those places. Dr. Selig mentioned Noah Marsh, who was the sheriff of Westfield and very much involved with the apprehension of the murderer of Reverend Caldwell. And if you've ever wondered why Gallows Hill Road is called Gallows Hill Road, it's because the murderer of Reverend Caldwell was hanged there. Learned that as part of this project as well. Anyway, the Hetfield family, who Dr. Selig also mentioned, Samuel Downer owned the general store in town, and Downer Street is a big, busy street in Westfield, which has on one corner now Paul Robeson Corner, which I find really nice and appropriate that that's part of Downer Street now. All of these families owned slaves. The Denman family, very prominent family, owned half of what is now Cranford. The Drake family in Scotch Plains. Philemon Elmer Street is right behind Starbucks in Westfield. And Philemon Elmer was a very important and well-known surgeon. He was Washington's surgeon while he was in New Jersey. He owned a number of slaves. The Scudder family and the Dunham family. And we have records of their having owned slaves, bought and sold them. Some of them had runaways and they were listed as well. So I think it's sort of an enduring reminder that when you pass some of these streets, that these are families that have been part of the fabric of Westfield since its beginnings. And indeed, most of these families also enslaved people. So a little bit of a review. When the first half of the research project, I sort of started by compiling a list of as many African Americans in this part of New Jersey as I could find. And I found them from a lot of different sources, which I'll talk about in a minute. The list continues to grow. It's up to 200 now. And that list includes everyone from approximately 1704 to 1866, when slavery ended in New Jersey. So it's bigger than this project, but I keep finding more and more names. One of the things that I was very fortunate to do was to visit the Westfield Presbyterian Church, and they allowed me to see their original records of births, marriages, and burials, and to take pictures of those records, which has been so helpful in this project. And in those records, I found a number of these people mentioned, sometimes as by their race and sometimes by who owned them. So, for example, someone would be called, Matthias Clark's Jane, and that's how we know Jane was his slave, because there's a possessive there. I've identified a number of people who I'll talk about in a few minutes, and begun to identify burials. Most notably, in the first round of this research, we identified the interment of a man named Sambo. We don't know the location, but we know for sure that he was buried from the Presbyterian Church. And Julia helped me immensely by finding him in the first place. And then we've done a little bit more research to find out exactly who he was and what he did. And we're still hoping to find some record of where he was interred. I identified a number of families and continue to identify more, and have found birth certificates and other things at the New Jersey Historical Archives. So that was all sort of what I did in the first part of the project. And this part is basically just building on all of that. Developing a comprehensive database of the names of African Americans living in the Westfields, Rahway, Scotch Plains, Newark, and Elizabeth. I've actually found some in Metuchen and Woodbridge and Piscataway as well that I'm including just because I know about them, but they aren't part of officially the Westfields. Creating a comprehensive database listing of burial and interment dates, as many locations as I can find, individual stories, manumissions, birth certificates, transcriptions of original sources, and links. And there is a wealth of information already available online, which I'm trying to bring together in what I hope will be a very thorough website that will be hosted by the Westfield Historical Society. Research and produce a comprehensive database of the locations of burials of the Revolutionary era African Americans, and that is an ongoing project. And I've hit a wall in part because of the records that were basically not kept during that time. But I'll show you, we have a glimmer of light in that area. And looking for descendants, we definitely have one definite descendant living in Westfield till to today. And I'm reaching out to as many people as I can. That one is a little bit trickier because it depends on them self-identifying and responding back to me. So that's the scope of what I've been trying to do for this second part. So the current list of people, as I said, lists over 200 names, close to 70 now, from 1704 to 1781. And some of these names may seem familiar to you. If you know anything about the history of enslaved people in this area, you will have heard of Caesar, who is buried at the Baptist Church in Scotch Plains. He's the first African-American member of that church. And he has been recorded and discussed quite a lot in this area, very fortunately. He was a teamster during the war, and we have his war record as evidence for that. Sambo, as I mentioned before, who was the sexton at the Presbyterian Church and was very well known to the members of the community. He would have lit the fire in the mornings. He would have provided paper for meetings. He buried people. He rang the bell, very importantly, because every time something important happened during the war, that bell would be rung. And we know he was buried from the church, but again, we're still trying to figure out where. One person I've uncovered whose name is Pomp, worked for at least two families. He ultimately purchased his own daughter's freedom in 1805. Ambo, who's buried in the Rahway, the big Rahway Historical Cemetery, was born in 1734 and died in 1834 and was enslaved for her entire life. So she was a slave for 100 years. Walter de Camp, buried in the Presbyterian Church in Westfield. His is the only African-American grave that has a marker in the Presbyterian Church graveyard. Charles and Lewis Carl, whose graves may be lost to history, I'm not sure, but they were alive during this time in Westfield. And a man named Jack, who is buried in Woodbridge. We don't have a lot of actual graves, unfortunately, and I'll show you the ones that we do have. The resources I've used have included, again, the Westfield Presbyterian Church, local tax and census records, which the Westfield Historical Society made available online, Fairview Cemetery, the New Jersey Historical Archives, the New Jersey Slavery Records Database, the Northeast Slavery Records Database, the inventories of damages by the British in New Jersey, which Dr. Selig mentioned as well, and that's hosted by the Department of State and is a wealth of information. The Winans collection at Princeton, a number of books and local histories that have been recorded in Westfield, and of course the Historical Society archives themselves. So there is a lot of information, and I'm hoping that my website will ultimately, our website will ultimately host links to everything so that we'll have a really thorough list of everything that's available. So on these 2 pages, I'll skip here just so you can see, I have the names of the families that we know for sure enslaved people during this time. And again, you'll recognize some of these names: the Corey family, the Crane family, Philemon Elmer, Jedediah Swan, who Dr. Selig mentioned, is on this page, the Marsh family, the Downers, many Clarks, Gideon Ross. So I have lists that these are the families that I know for sure. And unfortunately, I don't have a name for every single person they enslaved. In some cases, it's just a number. In some cases, it's a number with not even gender. We get more details and more information later after the war, when the law changed in New Jersey. In 1804, it became required that enslaved people have birth certificates. So we have them for many of them starting in 1804, but before that time we don't. We have records of births and weddings and baptisms. We have birth certificates, again, starting in 1804. We have purchase and sale receipts, manumission records, all of which are much after the war. We have wills. Jedediah Swan and Isaac Drake mention enslaved people in their wills. They give them to other people in their wills. We have runaway slave records, and Nathaniel Salmon of Westfield reported a runaway slave in 1769. Sometimes they have names, sometimes they don't. So my list of families who owned the slaves has more detail because they were the people whose records were kept better. This is an example of the kinds of records we have. So this is a wonderful record of the sale of a slave. She was born in 1794, just after the period we're talking about. But I wanted to include this, because Julia Diddell found it for us in Princeton, and also because it's such a beautiful document. It is a sale between Nathaniel Bennett of Woodbridge and Henry Baker of Westfield for a young woman named Jink. She was sold in 1811, and according to this contract, she will be freed at the age of 27. There was nothing in the law that required her to be freed, and we don't know if she was, but this sale contract insists that she should be. And so I think it's an important moment in time, because it's 1811 when this document was created. It's showing some progress that her freedom is even being discussed. Again, she's later than our specific period here. These are some records that are more closer to the time of the Revolution. The second one at the bottom here is, like Dr. Selig showed you, a record of the damage Hendrik Smock of Piscataway experienced during the war. And it's a long list, including 29 bushels of growing wheat, 2 tablecloths, and 1 able-bodied Negro man, 29 years of age. So this is a good example. We know Smock had this man. We don't know his name. And of course, he was lost during this time. He may have joined the British, because that was an option for enslaved people. He may have run away. He may have been killed. But at least we have a record that he existed, and so he gets included on our list. Smock was apparently a well-known enslaver, and he shows up in other places too in the records of New Jersey slavery. In the top example is a record where his woman named Nellie lay with a male child on the 4th day of March last, which she named Tom. So this is one of those sort of birth certificates. But he also adds that he intends to abandon all right, title, claim, and domain whatsoever to the child. 1806, that's because the child was born after that law saying that, well, the law says that if a child was born after July 1st of 1804, they will eventually be freed. He's saying, I think, in this document that he is free, but not the mother. This is one of the records from the Presbyterian Church. And this is Pomp Scudder. I call him Pomp Scudder. He's Pomp. He was owned by the Scudder family. Baptized in 1777, but was definitely an adult by then because his daughter is baptized in 1787. And it says, Pomp, a Negro man, offered his child to baptism named Flora. That's what this one says, July 23rd, 1787. And his, is described here, Pomp, a Negro man belonging to Ephraim Scudder, was baptized October 31st, 1777. And we've had to just read through all of these documents. Now, some of them were already digitized or transcribed, but I found more references in these documents than were originally recorded, because again, sometimes it just has an apostrophe S indicating a person's ownership of another person. And so I've added to the list from that. Another record is from, and I mentioned this last year as well, Sambo, who I've mentioned before. This is the interment record from the Presbyterian Church showing that Sambo was buried from the church in 1814. And it says Sambo, many years sexton, African, age 70. So we don't know exactly what many years sexton means or how many years that was, but we know he was definitely the sexton during the Revolution. And there are a couple of stories associated with him during that time. Also, his house was identified on this contemporary map right up here. This is where now is Stanley Oval in Westfield, near what was the arsenal at the time of the Revolution. And I keep telling people, I think it's remarkable that it says Henry Baker, that he owned the house, Nathaniel Baker, Dr. Philemon Elmer. These are the owners of the houses. And his name is here. It's not the name of the person who enslaved him. It's his name and his position in the community. And I think that shows us that he was a very well-regarded member of the community at the time. These are another kind of research that I found is looking at runaway slave ads. These are two a little earlier than the war, but contemporary. This is from Canoe Brook in Essex County, so probably close to what's now Cranford. Two Negro slaves, it says, one named Cato, and they're described, and their value is described. And then another one in 1769. This is the one formerly the property of Nathaniel Salmon of Springfield, of Westfield, but also of Springfield. And they give us sometimes names. So we have Britt and Cato, and sometimes it's just someone was escaped and they don't give a name, they just give a description. This is after the war, but I wanted to show you what the manumission records look like as well. So this is from the New Jersey Archives, and this is a document freeing a man named John Williams, but they call him Jack. And all the documents have pretty much the same language. It tells them about the age and that they are in no bodily incapacity of obtaining support, and who is their owner. In this case, Samuel B. Miller, who was very much a member of the community of Westfield. And it says he was liberated, manumitted, set free April 4th, 1826. We know he was born in 1795. So he was 31. And his wife, Lem, was freed at the same time, but by a different family. Another aspect of the research I've had to do is find the burials of these folks. And I've done research at the Presbyterian Church in Westfield, Presbyterian churches in Woodbridge and Elizabeth, We know that there were home burials and family cemeteries, all of which are gone now, I think, locally, but some of which were moved to Fairview and in Rahway Cemetery. This is a loose end because most of the African Americans who were moved from older places to Fairview, for example, went unnamed. So Fairview has a big long list of the very earliest burials there of unnamed people. And they're together in some sections and they're around other families in other sections. And so what I have to do is literally walk through Fairview and try to figure out if I can match any of the people we think should be buried there to the families that they're associated with in the cemetery. It's literally walking around the cemetery and finding that. And I'm still working on that part. The burials that we have found include Walter de Camp, who was buried in the Westfield burying ground, the Presbyterian Church burial ground. He's the only one in Westfield who is identified by name. We have Caesar in Scotch Plains. He's the only African American at the Baptist Church. We have Jack in the Woodbridge Presbyterian Church, and Ambo, I mentioned before, who was 100 years old. She's in Rahway. Lafayette Boylston, who's buried at the First Presbyterian Church in Elizabeth. He's the only named enslaved person there. He died 6 months before he would have gained his freedom. In Fairview, we have Jude and Anne, who died much after the Revolution, but they are the only enslaved people who are named in Fairview. And Walter de Camp, as I mentioned, his grave needs repair, and I'm hoping that at some point we can do that, repair his gravestone. And then there's a big empty space that some people argue is the resting place of Jack and Lem Williams, who I mentioned before, but may also be where some of the other African Americans are buried. Wally Brown, who maybe some of you know, is a resident of Westfield, and he is a direct descendant of Lem and Jack Williams, and he took us to this spot and said, "This is where my family says they are." So it's stories like that we have as our basis for some of the burial information, and it's sketchy, but I'm doing the best I can to try to identify as many as I can. But these other ones, this one and these, are the only gravestones in Union County of enslaved people that exist that I know about. No one else has a named gravestone. I think that's my last one. Yes. So I guess we're going to take questions later on. I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass it over to Nick Benevento.
Oh, sorry. Okay, everybody can see the slides? Okay. All right, my name is Nick Benevento. I'm the creator of Benevento's history blog. First, I'd like to thank Brian, Julie, Dr. Chewning, and Dr. Selig for allowing me to be part of this project. Before I get into my role in the project, I'll just share what I do as a history blogger and how I got started. I'm a history teacher in Glenridge, and I've been teaching for 11 years. I currently teach U.S. History 1 and U.S. History 2, as well as 7th grade Early American History and Civics. I've had a love for history since I was in high school myself. My goal as a teacher is to inspire a love of history in my students. 2 summers ago, I decided to launch my history blog as a creative outlet to share my enthusiasm for history with a wider audience. The blog provides me an opportunity to delve into topics that I'm most interested in and helps me connect with others who also share a love of history. I do aim to make my blog multidimensional, so it includes posts about historical travels, such as Gettysburg, Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, a trip to the Alamo in San Antonio, other places. My family has been very supportive in these endeavors. So for the past few years, we've gone on family vacations that involve some sort of history component. My wife and kids have been real troopers about going on history tours, visiting historical sites, and posing for blog photos as well. This year we're going to Disney, so try to, go to the different sites in Epcot, I guess. I also share family visits to local historical events as well, such as Washington's Crossing State Park, March to Yorktown Day, History on the Green in Somerville, Washington's headquarters in Morristown, the Battle of Monmouth reenactment, and historic sites in Philadelphia. As my blog has evolved over the last 2 years, I found that much of the blog focuses on New Jersey's role in the American Revolution. Additionally, my blog includes essays where I explore historical theories and pose what-if questions. So, for example, I've analyzed whether or not compromise was possible in the lead up to the American Revolution. I have pondered what would have happened to the United States had the Union lost the Civil War. I've imagined what Reconstruction would have been like if Lincoln lived into his second term. These posts allow me to share not just facts, but also interpretations and perspectives, encouraging readers to think critically about how history is shaped and remembered, and ultimately could have gone in a different direction. I also include reviews of historical books, films, and documentaries, adding another layer of content to engage different types of readers. Ultimately, my goals for the blog are similar to my goals as a teacher, to inspire curiosity and to educate. I also want to promote awareness of historical events and organizations. I see it as a platform that encourages people to visit historical sites, attend events, and explore topics on their own. So if a person decides to visit a battlefield, read a biography, or support a local historical society after reading my blog, then I would consider that a success. The blog has also helped me build relationships with other history groups and organizations. I've connected with organizations like the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Road of New Jersey, RevNJ, and the Westfield Historical Society. Through these relationships, I've been able to promote events and keep my readers informed about what's happening locally. These organizations have also been very supportive in sharing my blog website as well. When I do publish a blog post, I share it on my Facebook, Instagram, and X pages to reach a broader audience. Social media has been a valuable tool for expanding the blog's visibility and staying connected with readers. On these platforms, I can post additional content like video clips or quick history facts that don't necessarily make it into the blog website. I found that this combination of long-form writing and quick visual content really does help keep followers engaged. So how did my blog become involved in this project? I met Julie when I attended the March to Yorktown Day in 2023 with my daughter, and I wrote a blog post about our visit there. I became a proud member of the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route of New Jersey. Julie reached out to me about writing blog posts about the research project, and I was immediately excited about the opportunity. Like many of you, I've been truly impressed by the work the researchers have done. As you just heard, Dr. Chewning's findings on the roles that African Americans played in the region, and Dr. Selig's discoveries about the general mood of New Jersey's inhabitants during the Revolutionary War. These are the kinds of stories that deserve to be told more widely, and I felt privileged to bring their story to a broader audience. This project has been a unique experience for me, has helped me help give my blog a new direction as well. We met via Zoom in November and January, and I posted the first blog article in February. Throughout the process, I've gathered material for the blog posts through our meetings, reading team emails, and reviewing the documents and notes shared by the researchers. The first blog post first introduced readers to the research team, gave an overview of their goals, summarized their early findings, and discussed their plans going forward. In my blog posts, I'm able to share photos of the research being done within the article. When the Westfield Historical Society shared the first blog post on their social media sites, it was exciting to see how many new readers came to the blog to learn more. We had additional meetings in March and May. I'll be posting the second and final blog article at the end of this month. It's been fascinating to see the project unfold. Not just the discoveries, but also the hard work, problem solving, and collaboration that has gone into making this project a success. This experience has been incredibly rewarding on a personal and professional level. It's given me a behind-the-scenes look at how historical research is done, from the challenges of piecing together fragmented sources to the excitement of uncovering new information. It has also allowed me to produce blog content that's unique, timely, and deeply connected to the local community. Most importantly, it has reminded me why I started the blog in the first place: to tell stories that matter, to connect people with the past, and to keep history alive in meaningful and accessible ways. It's truly been a privilege to share the researchers' work, to help promote what the Westfield Historical Society is doing for the community, and to play a small part in preserving and highlighting our shared history. So please stay connected by checking out the website and following my social media pages. Thank you.
Wow, that was great, Nick. I'm speechless because if we have any influence in your getting involved in research, then we've done our job, right, Susannah?
Mhm.
And Susannah, your information just keeps growing and deepening, and the community owes you a debt of gratitude for documenting and researching this important information. So thank you, Susannah. So President Remite, Brian, we've come to the end of our formal presentation, and wondering if there are any questions in the chat, or if anyone in the audience has a question, they can raise their hand. Any questions in the chat right now, Brian?
There were no questions, just a comment about Caesar, who was enslaved and freed in 1769 prior to the war.
Okay, and who provided us with that information?
Nancy Piawar.
Nancy is the Caesar aficionado, and we accredited her with giving us a lot of information. So thank you, Nancy. And so I have a question, Nick.
Sure.
Where do you think this project should go next? I'm putting you on the spot.
Some sort of display in town. Something that'll be long lasting.
Okay, that's good. Susannah, what do you think?
I agree. I think that, and then there are a lot of ways that we could do that. There's a Northeast U.S. project that records the names of enslaved people in towns like this on little bricks. The name of it right now, Memory Stones, I think it's called. And it's a wonderful project. And I think it would be great if Westfield could participate in that. I think the website, which other people can contribute to, would be a great opportunity, as well as collaborating with other historians in New Jersey. I've done a little bit of that. The authors of If These Stones Could Talk, who wrote about Mercer County in that area, I met with them. And so I'm hoping that we can do more of that as well.
That's great. Who knew we had so much information right here in Westfield, right, Susannah? So
Yes.
It's been great. It has been an honor and a pleasure to work with the researchers and Nick. It's been a great learning experience for all of us. I hope we get to work again. Are there Brian, any other comments in chat?
Yes, Nancy also asked, are you aware of the 10 Million Names project? And they linked to it in the chat. It's 10millionnames.org.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. All right, anyone from the audience have a question or comment? Please unmute yourself. And if not, we will just bid you adieu. Look for our next project, whatever it may be. And thank you, Connie. You say it's been very interesting. We appreciate that. So thanks to all, and we'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you all so much for coming on behalf of the Westfield Historical Society, the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route, and all of our researchers. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.